have this partnership with Open Air. It really is so very special. So if you haven't been here before, welcome. We are known as a building reuse materials store, right? We have an amazing thrift store out there of all sorts of building materials. And but our reach goes much farther than that. And so really sharing with you all that we're a sustainability center, that we care about having a community that's sustainable now and forever in the future for the next generations is really what Home Resource is all about. And this partnership really means a lot to Home Resource because it gives an opportunity for us to invite people that might not be interested in the building materials stuff that we do, but might see potential in those similar or same materials in turning them into amazing art projects or being really creative in different ways with them. And so it's awesome to have partnerships that expand our reach into the Missoula community and just help us spread the message of wanting to create a sustainable future for Missoula. So welcome to Home Resource. I said to Stoney a few moments ago that BT's the best, the very, very best in the whole wide world. This placement has just been really, really special and so great. Really just woven into our culture here, and the staff have loved having you around. I have loved having you around. It feels like a blink of an eye.
It has.
In a minute, right? Like, kept thinking like, oh, next week we'll talk about that. There's no time in these placements for that kind of energy. But we are so thankful to have had you here. You're welcome anytime, all the time. And you all are welcome anytime and all the time as well. But really thankful for this partnership. So thanks for being here today. Come back again. Tell your friends. Here we are.
Signed it.
Yeah, it's character.
Hi all, I'm the other Kelly. I'm the program coordinator for Open Air. I'm delighted to read you all BT's bio today. So, BT Livermore was born in Minnesota in 1980 and has pretty much always been making or creating something, anything, since childhood. In 2005, BT traded in 6 months of snow for 6 months of rain and moved out west to Portland, Oregon. Even after vowing they'd never go back to college again, BT graduated from Pacific Northwest College of Art with a BFA degree in illustration in May of 2010, a nice addition to an earlier AAS degree in web design from Minneapolis Community and Technical College in 2003. In 2016, BT packed up once again and headed for the mountainous enclave of Butte, Montana, where they currently reside. Teaching and sharing their knowledge of various skills and tools play a major factor in BT's creative life. They've worked as an adjunct instructor in the graphic design program at Portland State University, as well as the professional and technical communication program at Montana Technological University. They are currently the manager of the Community Printmaking Workshop at the Imagine Butte Resource Center and teach art workshops whenever and wherever possible. BT's professional skill set these days includes traditional sign painting, gold leaf work, and other handmade lettering, illustration, logo design, and also screen printing and letterpress printing. Beyond that, BT also dabbles in woodworking, furniture construction, restoration, and sewing. So everyone, welcome BT here.
Oh, thank you so much for coming, everybody. Welcome to Home Resource. I hope you all have been here before anyway. First off, obviously I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Stoney and Kelly and Kasia and all the Open Air board members that help make stuff like this happen. It's been a long time since I've been able to have the time and the focus to be able to do a residency, certainly one of this length, and that really means a lot. And thank you also to the other 3 of my cohort of Shelby and Michelle and Justine, other artists that are here in town right now. And thank you to Kelly and everybody at Home Resource. I live in Butte, as you heard, if you don't know, and I do come to Missoula occasionally, and if I have time, I always try to make time to come here. I love stores like this. When I was living in Portland for 11 years, there's an absolutely massive store called Rebuilding Center with an absolutely similar vibe and similar what they do. And I was there multiple times a week when I was living there, and I'm a regular at the Habitat Restore in Butte. So this just seemed like such a good fit when I knew I had the opportunity to have a residency here. And I am honored to get to dig through the piles of junk. I lovingly referred to this place as a palace of trash at one point during my time here, and absolutely lovingly mean that. That is a compliment for me. As you got from my bio, I do a lot of different things. I honestly get bored pretty easily if I have to if I'm always doing design or if I'm always painting or printing. You know, when I was like 5 years old and I learned that you had to do something for your life, when you were an adult, like I wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist, and that led me down the path to illustration eventually. But throughout that time period, like I was always picking things up, taking things apart, you know, collecting tools wherever I can. I started woodworking like in junior high when I was 12 and just absolutely I love power tools, I love hand tools, I love sawdust. And but so I kept down the track. I've studied special effects makeup art. That was an absolute love of mine as a child. My grandmother taught me how to sew when I was young. My mom helped as well, and I've been doing that. And I just love the act of making. I love the act of working with my hands. And I think it's those skills that have allowed me to be very flexible, and especially in things like working with junk and working with, you know, things that may not be their original use. That flexibility of tool use and going through different techniques has allowed me to be able to kind of piece things together. I also refer to it as using the wrong tool for the job while I've been here too, because sometimes that is what you need. But my career, I guess, as making, I got my illustration degree. Before my senior year, I took a semester off for health reasons, and at that point, that would have been 2009, my brain just clicked one day, and it was letters. I went from drawing cartoons and doing like comic book, self-publishing, newspaper illustration, to all I wanted to make was letters. So when I did decide to go back for my illustration degree, my thesis ended up being an alphabet book that was fully illustrated, so I could like tie in those two. Like I wanted to finish out the illustration degree, but I really wanted to figure out how to incorporate specifically hand-drawn, hand-designed letter forms into what I do. And once I got out of school, I did quite a bit of illustration work, but my love for letters just really took over after that. And I don't do that much illustration anymore. But I was lucky enough to live in a city at the time, Portland, that still has a traditional sign supply store called Pacific Coast Sign Supply. So you can go and you can buy huge, you know, 6-foot wide vinyl plotters and everything you need for your modern sign shop, but they also have paintbrushes and enamel paint and gold leaf supplies and things like that. And I walked in one day and just talked to the person behind the counter, and I was like, hey, this is what I do. Everything has a digital finish, but everything is starting as this hand-drawn type. That's all I want to do. I want to know how to really do this the right way. And I kind of saw his eyes light up a little bit, and he grabbed a brush from underneath the counter, specifically like a lettering quill brush, and grabbed me a little pot of black one-shot paint, which is pretty standard sign paint. And he's like, you buy these, you go practice for a couple weeks, come back, buy a different size brush, see how that works. Eventually come back, buy a couple different colors of paint, and just keep working at it and see what happens. And I did that, and the paint works like no other paint I've ever touched, so it's a huge learning curve just to figure out how that works with the brushes. And the brushes, like I had been doing watercolor and acrylic painting and things like that, and the brushes for sign painting are longer so they can hold more paint and do sort of flowy script and things like that. And so I got my practice done, and I was already doing gallery shows and things like that as a printmaker, as a as an illustrator and painter, and I started making work that looked like this for galleries, and specifically started out using things that were reclaimed. So things like this, I would make sometimes much larger constructions. I'd go to places like Home Resource and find old siding and flooring and things like that, and just like piece them all together and figure out what kind of phrasing was going to fit on that. High, wide, and handsome started out, as far as I've seen, as a Montana Highway Department slogan. This was the first thing I put up, and I was like, I don't need to like nail it in anywhere. If anyone doesn't follow me on Instagram, there it is. I'll put it right there. And things like this. This was actually done during my last big art residency that I did. This was 2016, I think, at Aramont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. They have an event every year called the Pentaculum, where they invite different, was that 2016? You were there, that's where I met Courtney. And they invite people from different medias and different arts to come in, and they had a specific group of sign painters come in that year and all hang out. And so this was found at like a reuse scrap art supply store in Raleigh, North Carolina, as I was like traveling around before the residency. And it was already warped when I got it. It's like a panel from a old furniture piece or something. And it's become even more warped over the years as I've moved and changed humidity levels and things like that. But this really sums up a lot of what I do, because A, it's using reclaimed materials, which I love to do, but also the phrase that's on it, introverted showman, is something that I overheard in a coffee shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, on that same trip. And I went in there. The only other customers were a couple that were sitting in the corner. And one of them said that that is how their dad described himself, as an introverted showman. And I overheard that conversation across the way, and I just wrote that down in my sketchbook. And that's how I get a lot of my material. It's maybe not quite as direct as that, but like if I'm biking around or walking, I love hearing, one half of one side of a phone conversation that someone is having. Or here at Home Resource, I'm like perched up in the mezzanine above the flooring section, and I can hear people come in to like tell the cashier what they have or to ask questions. I can hear couples having arguments below me about what flooring they should choose or not choose. And those things all get processed through my head, and then some of them, the special ones, get written down for use later. So I'm glad I still have that piece saved. But in my time here, along with my sign painting, which has sort of become my career, I've always had this background in working. Once I was like getting wood for signs for gallery shows, there's so much other stuff that's exists in places like this. And so I would start grabbing things like old flashlights and tool handles and electrical switches and whatever I could, and I started building specifically lamps. There's something, I love their functionality, I love their ubiquitous, like we've all got lamps in our house, but hopefully I can make something that isn't what you'd go and buy at Target. Using all these fun materials that already just have this rich energy to them, whether it's like the patina and rust on the metal, or just finding wood that might have maybe some like insect trails in it or tool marks still left on it of whoever like cut off that piece of wood that's right here. And also just the tactile feeling of old switches is something that is so pleasing to me. Like modern day house switches, they're silent for the most part. It's just like this little thing. And this, like that feels good, it sounds good. And especially this, it like rings on the metal a little bit. And having like this pull chain There's something just very satisfying about that. So I started this collection, and there's like a magic I find of like, it's the hunt, it's finding that right piece. Like I can't always find what I want. So sometimes a project gets set aside to work on something that makes sense, and then I can come back to it. So this lamp in particular, this is made, the base is a vintage Champion spark plug tester. And I pulled this out of a dumpster in Butte about 4 years ago. And it did not have spark plugs in it. One of the mirrors in it was broken. But I knew I had to do something with it. It was such a fascinating piece as it was. And I was like, lamp base. I had nothing to make the actual fixture part of it. I didn't have switches. I ended up sourcing old spark plugs on eBay for it that would fit it. Cut a new mirror for it, and then it stopped because I had nothing to go. Like I had no parts to make it go up. That made sense. And so I let it sit, and I'd pull it out occasionally, maybe every 4 or 5 months. Try again. If I found something, nothing was working, put it away. It got into like a storage basement for a long time, and I was like, I'm gonna bring it to Home Resource and see what happens. And it sat here again. First day, actually, first week, I found the 2 lights of like a exterior light fixture, and then that's kind of where it's at. And then I found some pipes, and I was like, oh, that would be kind of cool. Like it pulls it up, but then it's finding the parts that make the pipe and the light fixture go together, and that's where I got stuck again. And I don't weld. Of all the skills I have, I've always wanted to learn how to weld, and I feel like things like this would be a lot easier if I just had that. But I love finding mechanical connections. I love making. I don't ever try to like just epoxy something and hope that it holds. I want something that screws in. I want like a pin that goes through that holds something. And then literally just yesterday morning, all I had left, I had finished this, I had finished some of these other pieces, I had finished that, and I walked around and I found all the pieces I needed to make everything fit together and screw in. And like inside this are parts. This is sort of my like the wrong tool for the job thing of, if sometimes you just have to make the part you need. So there's internal parts that I had to modify from pieces I could find that actually like fit inside these other plumbing fittings that you'll never see, but it's the only thing holding it together is the fact that I was able to make something that's like inside there. And then the base, the wooden base it's like a deer mount kind of plaque. And I knew I always wanted some kind of base for this, but I had never found that either. And I had taken this from Butte with me, and I was like, oh, Champion, like Champion, the name of the spark plugs, Champions, trophies, and it led to like, plaques and like, I guess, deer trophies and things like that. And I was like, let's just see how that works. So I like making those connections too, whether or not anyone else is going to, especially as someone that works with words as much as I do. I also grew up with a father who was an English teacher and had me like reading and proofreading his students' papers from a very young age. So words and wordplay make me very happy. And so finding the right phrase, like in for the showman, or safe and sound. This light box I made completely out of stuff that was here. This is an old oak window frame that was about twice as wide. I chopped it down in the wood shop here. It had this beautiful like hardware handle, which is what really got me interested initially. And then the box itself is just made from some absolutely beautiful wood that had been poorly painted white over that I found out in the yard. And it was enough to cut down to make the box. And then it's got window hardware on the bottom. And then it's just an LED shop light in there that I found and slightly modified with my own LED strip lights that I had. And then the green like security plexi I also found here, and I had never seen that. I've seen security glass with like chicken wire in it, but I hadn't really seen the plexi before, and certainly not in this like fun translucent green color. So the box totally came together before I had any idea what it was going to say, and it took that time to just play around and think about like, well, this is like security plexi because it's got the grade in it, and then what do we think about with the word security, and that leads to safety, and then my love of alliteration, and like, oh, safe and sound is way better than, it's got that nice S to it. And then this lettering particular, like a lot of my stuff, as a sign painter, you kind of have a number of alphabets that you are pretty standard to use that you can do pretty quickly. But it's always, you know, I've got books and books full of inspiration from decades worth of painting and advertising. But this lettering in particular was pulled inspiration from the paint room here, from a can of contact cement that just had a really, really fun lettering on the word cement on it that looked very similar to this. And so that was the basis for that, and that's where like just all kind of started coming together. And in my time here, so this lamp got finished, this light box was here. These, I came with the flashlights. I love old flashlights, metal body ones. Everything else is from Home Resource. And then this piece, everything is from Home Resource except for just the plywood that I made the sign out of. But I wanted something that was still functional and like interactive, but didn't necessarily plug in like the other pieces. That felt very fitting for Home Resource as well. I was initially going to like motorize this and try to get it to turn really slowly, and I was like, no, it's fun to get to do that. And also use things like granite, which is never a material that I've used before, and there's a lot out in the yard. If you need some granite, please go get some granite. And luckily I came, for my glass work, I use diamond drill bits to drill holes through the glass if it has to hang anywhere. And those work great on granite as well, so I was able to make that happen. And so, but along a lot of this other stuff I made here too. I also sell at the Made Fair, which happened on Sunday. So a lot of the smaller items, these boxes are 35 millimeter slide cases that were here, that I pulled out the dividers and just kind of honestly just asked a bunch of people what would be fun to put on those. Same thing here, this piece of glass was here with the curved corners, as was this oak base that I custom built. Once again, just a chunk of oak that was out in the yard. But these pieces right here, and when we're done, everyone can absolutely feel free to come up and touch stuff and twist this around. Along with my time here at Home Resource, I've spent a lot of time at the makerspace at the library here, which is one of the other open air resident locations, but obviously open to the public as well. And they have a laser there that is very nice. And I love it. And so this is a 23 karat gold leaf on the back of this glass. I use it a lot. It's right here. And there's traditions in sign painting to get different effects on your gold leaf. The mirror finish on that, I can actually just pass this around, just watch out for the top, it's very sharp. The mirror finish is like a water-based process that pulls the gold leaf flat against the glass. But there's effects, like this interior is just like a clear varnish that goes on first, and then when you put the gold over it, it interrupts the mirror finish of that. There's also traditionally, you can acid etch the glass before you put the gold down, and that gives this lovely like pebbly texture to it.
Is that what you did with that?
So this is taking that next step further into like taking this incredibly traditional art form and adding some technology to it. So this is my test piece where I just found some images online of cool textures and ran it through the laser. So the laser etched all the glass first, and then I put the gold on the back of that. And I haven't seen anyone do that before in the sign painting world. So that was the test. And then if you want to see them up close later, both of these roll D20 pieces I took the stone texture that's on there, and I've made these in the past before with acid etched glass and with other matte effects and glitter and things like that. But I planned it out to fill the interiors with the stone texture with the laser, and then everything else happened after that to make this piece with my dungeon floor texture, as I call it. And so that's something that like I didn't expect at all coming into this residency. Like I knew the makerspace would be an option. I had a knowledge of what was here. And then it was sort of like once we had the first day orientation tour, I was like, oh, I need to get on that laser. I have a small laser at home that cannot etch glass in my home studio, and now the wheels are turning as to like, what can I do to have an excuse to come back to Missoula and use this laser and hang out with more people. And then I did one other piece here. This Howdy piece was more of a test with doing sort of an all-over etch. So there's like this little line that's inside, and then the chain link texture. And so this is 23 karat gold on the lettering and then 12 karat on the rest, the sort of silver color. Yeah, I don't know. I love old stuff. I love the feel of it. I love going into the bathroom and washing my hands and just seeing the age just come off, like dirt and rust, and like finding things that you don't even know what they are. These frames were sitting out front here, and I just knew that I had to do something with them. I've learned at my time here at Home Resource that there's a much higher turnaround on a lot of especially the cool stuff that's here than I was maybe expecting. And so my first couple days I would just lightly pick through and grab what I wanted, and then I would like, oh, I really could have used that thing, and then I showed up and it's gone. So these I needed to grab right away, and then this like perfectly sized piece of chain for this, and chain link fence hardware to make like the heavy duty open close sign I've ever made. I don't know, gotta find the right spot. Most of them that I do are nice and light and can be flipped around. This one also made from here, just random piece of metal. But I think, you know, making stuff like this, it fits along with what has been my sort of entire creative life and career. As I've studied all of these different skills that made sense at the time, and maybe they became my focus for a little bit, and then I moved on. But I retained enough of that to, when I need to pull up my knowledge of sewing or makeup or woodwork, it comes together, and like I've sort of cobbled together all of these skills into whatever career I have, and that's the same kind of thing. It's like I can cobble together, you know, go out, dig through the palace of trash, and come up with something that I think is fun, even if it's, you know, I don't want to say this is useless, but you know, it's just it's there, or very useful, like lights. And I'm excited to keep working on the interactivity and the functionality of my work. I had a show in September at the Clark Chateau in Butte that involved a number of like large-scale interactive pieces that involved sign painting, but also reclaimed materials and things like vintage popcorn, movie theater popcorn machines, and radio cabinets and things like that. That tying in that sort of vintage materials and reused materials with my vintage-inspired sign painting, but also my love of just like, I'm tired sometimes of, you know, I was tired of doing gallery work where people could just look at it and then decide if they wanted to buy it or decide if they wanted to come and critique it or whatever. And it's so different when you have a show where you can come up and people are actually like touching things and really getting in and like working with what I've made rather than just looking at it. And I want to continue that, and this has been hugely inspirational to keep going down that road. Yeah, I think that's all I've got. So if there's any questions or comments or anything, I'm happy to have a chat with you.
Things go well, you wake up. And in the morning, or whenever you wake up, you say, oh, today I'm going to work on this sort of thing. Or do you roam around and get inspired by that which you trip over. So do you wake up with a plan, or do you wake up with a plan to be informed by what you might find?
More often than not, I woke up with a plan to be informed by what I could find here, because it changes so frequently.
So are the days that go by that say, not today?
Yeah, and I always knew, especially with having the Maid Fair, like I always had little things like this that I could work on days that maybe I didn't find something, but it is exactly as you said, my daily routine. When I came in here, I dropped my bag up in my studio, and then every day I walked the entirety of this place. Like, I walked past all the toilets, and I never once needed to use the toilet for what I did here, but I was gonna walk through, because you never know what else might be hiding in there. And I'd walk the lighting, and I'd go walk the yard, and I mean, most days I found something that was gonna inspire one of these pieces. And then at some point it hits that tipping point where you realize you have enough, you found enough to make the piece that you want. And things like, a lot of these funny glass flame globes, we noticed those on the orientation day walk around, and we just had to have one, and Shelby took one as well. And yeah, and I had no plans to do anything like this here, but I found this. I don't know what this is. It was longer when I got it. Could have been like upright as like part of a railing, but I picked it up and I was like, this is an interesting object. I don't know what this is. And I was holding it in my hand like this, and it tipped and it just started spinning. And I was like, oh, that's something I can work with. And I had initially thought to do, there's like a 2-frame animation technique that I think is like kind of Victorian era, where like classically you'd see like a piece of card with strings on it, and like one side has a bird and one side has an empty bird cage, and if you twist the strings, it looks like the bird is in the cage. I was like, I wonder if I could do something like that, but with letters. And so I was initially just going to say re on this side in the space, and then use it on this side and the white space, and I spun it, and I was like, you couldn't read it at all. Like, it just doesn't work as well with lettering. Like, you're not processing it like images. And then I thought, well, let me just make this like motorized little twisty sign. Like that feel of seeing that thing twist and knowing that could be something led to this. And then I was here like another week before I found these little posts, and I was like, oh, that'll do that. And then the handle just came together once again yesterday when I finished this lamp. I found this wooden tool handle, and it's a 3/8 inch Allen wrench that just like perfectly fit inside the square tubing. And there you have it. So yeah, it's a lot of not planning. It's a lot of just being very flexible on every given day.
Toilets.
Yeah. I do love plumbing overall.
Yeah,
I use a lot of plumbing in my project.
What's in your toolbox?
This is actually my on-the-go sign kit.
Oh, yeah.
Also using reclaimed materials. This was purchased last year from Circle Square here.
Oh, yeah, cool.
It might actually be a sign kit because it's set up really vertically for one. Opens like that. I've got room for brushes and pencils and everything like that. So
Are there handmade brushes in there?
I don't. Oh, actually, I do. I have my wall brushes.
Just curious as to what the sign painting
Yeah.
brushes look like.
The brushes that I use for this stuff are obviously much smaller, and if anyone wants to come up and see the studio when we're done, I'm happy to take folks up there. These brushes are what I use for like brick walls and stucco and things like that. They're made out of a hog bristle. So if you
This
have
is
like
for painting?
That's
for
for-
doing the lettering?
for lettering or anything on like an exterior hard surface. So like
Cool.
these, if you have like a hole in a brick, you can just really stab it in there to get your paint in there, and they hold up. But the things that I use for that are much finer, longer, finer hairbrushes. But yeah, this has most of everything I need for a job besides the paint, but there's room in there for whatever paint I need, and all my gold leaf stuff has its own little box if I need to do that.
Oh, go ahead, Shelby.
Shelby? Yes?
I was just kind of thinking about like the functionality and
a little bit of a difference I see between like the safe and sound piece and like an open and closed or like come on in. I was wondering if like you approach those a little differently. Like the safe and sound to me feels more like a work of art, I guess. I mean, they all are, but like one is sort of like commercial, I
Yeah.
guess. And one is, yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think the safe and sound is this nice kind of bridge between the two. It's like allowing me to do stuff that looks, you know, like this, but tying in, I mean, it's not functional, like that wouldn't be something where if it was in a gallery, I'd want people like yanking the chain on it, but like the mere fact that it turns on and does something, you know it does because it has the chain. Like it's certainly not something that someone would have like in their hallway as a light source at home, for sure. So no, I agree with you. Like the light fixtures and lamps are made specifically, you know, someone's gonna find that appealing for their decor and buy that, and it has a more commercial feel to it. The safe and sound I definitely feel is more of like gallery work, piece of art, if you will. So for sure. But I like that it said it's like this bridge between the two for me.
Yeah.
So do you keep a sketchbook? Like, okay, you found this awesome font. Then what? Do you take a photograph? Are you drawing? Like, how do you work out letters that don't show up in those fonts?
Sure.
Fill in the gaps.
So the one thing about lettering that occasionally I've taught some like basic hand lettering courses. There's really only like, it's like 5 or 6 strokes that make up any letter of the 26 Roman alphabet letters. And you know, you've got like a straight up and down, but that's also those in the H. You've got the across, you've got a C curve, you've got a D curve, you've got a diagonal and a capital N, and then you have an S. And that is pretty much it. That can make everything. So it allows you, like, you know, if I am working directly from a reference like the cement thing for safe and sound, you know, I can figure out if certain strokes are this wide, they're going to be that wide on these parts on whatever letter I need. And like, you know, anything going that way, sort of, or like the top of the A, the top of the S, like that's all got to be the same height. Otherwise, it really looks strange when you're seeing it. So honestly, like you can create that like a full alphabet from honestly just a few pieces. And sometimes it's fun to mess with that and do stuff that maybe doesn't necessarily fit with it, but it works anyway to just mix it up. And that's the beauty of doing things by hand and not just I'm not just typing this out on a computer and don't have any choice but to adjust the kerning on it. You know, I can have letters that have a little bounce to them, and that has a whole different feel than if I letter it with like a nice smooth straight baseline and everything. It has a lot more character and energy to it. Or, you know, doing things on like an arc, things like that. Or being able to, you know, match like the contours of whatever I'm doing, and like the letter gets smaller, and therefore you have to sort of work down of like, you know, this vertical line on the D is much larger than the, like widthwise than on the H, but it progressively you just sort of whatever feels right to the eye. I'm not doing. There's certainly people that can get into like the math behind like if this is this wide, then this should be this wide, and that's where it should go. And I have some books that say that, and I've read them, but I don't always follow those. But yeah, I mean, a lot of what I do honestly is whatever feels right. I don't do a lot of like direct like I saw this cool letter, I'm gonna make something that looks like that. If I do, it might be something more like in Butte, we've got ghost signs everywhere, and I've started to pulled from some of those. But like, as I've been sign painting now for 12 years or so, you start having things that you know you can do over and over again. You know it's going to work for a certain project. So
So when you are kind of thinking about those other references, is it just something that you capture in your memory and then translate onto a final piece, or is there a kind of a drafting process or like a?
Yeah, I do sketchbook work. I used to do a lot more. Honestly, it's a lot more of my sketchbook now is just like writing of the initial phrases. And then if there is like a really special letter, maybe I'm sketching that out to see how that feels versus taking a picture of it. But yeah, my sketchbooks have become way more note-taking than drawing, especially as I've gotten further and further away from like my illustration past, where it was just all very heavily drawn in. But honestly, a lot of this stuff, everything here is done directly on the piece. So I use a water-soluble pencil. So if I got the idea in my head, I can just draw out my baseline, my top line, pencil it out. If that looks good, just go at it with a brush. I try to keep it fairly simple, just to, unless it needs to be super crisp for a client job. And then once you're done, paint dries, you can wipe everything off. So honestly, I'd probably do a lot more sketching like on the piece when I'm doing things like this than I would in a sketchbook. Like I might wipe this down, and like I said, I can't adjust the kerning if like I would on a computer. If I got it wrong, I have to wipe it all off and move everything over to where it needs to be. And then oftentimes that'll change the lettering too. Like you might draw an S slightly different way the second time through. That works a lot better.
I think one thing that strikes me about your work is I think the way that you put things together and don't glue and don't weld and that kind of stuff, it like gives it a feeling to me that it's how it's meant to be, right? And so I'm curious, like, if you think about a life cycle of your work, because now you've made something and turned it into something else. Do you think about like where it goes in the future?
Like where that specific piece
Yeah,
goes?
you've already like given it a life,
Right.
and then will it have another life, or does it end?
I haven't thought too much about that, honestly. That's a fascinating concept because, yeah, who knows where, I've never like found one of my old pieces in the shop somewhere, sold for parts, but I think that would be kind of fun, honestly. I would love the idea to think that way. I actually have found I've found shirts I've screen painted at like Goodwill before. But I would love it if it had another life. Like that's, someone else use it, reuse it. And yeah, I think that would be special if someone else could eventually turn it into something else. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious because you essentially left digital, right? Like you left computer.
For the most part, I still do some client work, design.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious because your process seems so hands-on and tangible. Like, do you even have a laptop in your studio?
Oh yeah.
Or like,
sure, yeah.
is there what is the interface with digital for you now, or do you see anything coming in the future too?
I think for like my day job, as it were, like working with clients that have logos or have specific needs, computers definitely are still part of it, even if the end result is sign painting, especially if I need to blow up a pattern that's very specific to fit on a window or a wall. But for this kind of stuff, like I brought my laptop here every single day for the first 2 weeks. And then I realized I'd never cracked it, ever. And so I left it at the house I've been staying at, and it makes my bag a lot lighter. It makes my bag feel happier at the end of the day, not having to lug that around. So yeah, for this kind of stuff, for sure. Like, I can, if I need reference, I've got my phone, but that's like the most level of technology really that I'm using. Anybody else?
I'm interested in the colors because it's a large contrast from what you're painting on.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you draw inspiration for your colors?
So as I mentioned at the beginning, like the paint I use, One Shot, is this very specific, it's been around for decades. an enamel paint. It can go on glass, it can go on wood, it can go on metal, it can go outside. So I mix colors for sure, especially if I'm doing things like that, and that will kick in all the color theory classes that I've taken over the years to think about. But a lot of it, especially if I'm doing stuff for clients, I often just use it. It's a color system that already exists that works really well together, even out of the pot. And if it's ever something like if I paint a window and someone comes by and keys the outside of the window and I have to come and fix that, it's easier to know that like, oh, that's Kansas City teal. I can take that and I can paint that, I can fix that for them. Or like doing sidewalk signs that get blown over onto the concrete and get scratched up. So in a way, like, I don't want to say it's laziness, but like it's easy to the colors look really good together, and it's kind of hard to clash with them because they've been so dialed in over the years. So a lot of it I certainly think about, you know, what color becomes like the focus on any given piece, but it's really easy to just kind of play around with the colors that already exist within that color system and see what happens.
Does one shot make metallics?
They do, and they're not great. Actually these two shiny things and no, jewelry is not actually just shiny things. Is a metallic brass. And they've got like gold and copper colored, and I don't know. I've never been a huge fan of it, but I have it. I'll often use for the gold leaf work. That's mostly why I have it. So as you saw with the panel, the practice panel in the back, it has like a heavy black paint that's on the back. But gold, especially when you're working with like the etching, it has like a texture to it. And the gold leaf, if you've never held gold leaf, it's so incredibly fine. You like breathe on it the wrong way, or if I'm working outside, wind gusts can just destroy it. And so sometimes the texture of the etching can actually like, it'll just break right through the gold. So you have to put a couple layers of gold on. If it's solid enough, I can use that black paint. It works really well, it dries fast, but often what I'll have to do, especially on client jobs, is to back it up with a metallic paint that like is close enough of a match. So if there is like a tiny little hole, you're not gonna notice it. So that's mainly what I have the metallics for. If I'm gonna use metallic, I would rather use the actual metal.
Did you just do the lettering that says dependable champion? Or
Nope,
is that there?
That is
That's
there.
awesome.
That is screen printed from the get-go.
That would make a fun t-shirt.
It would, yeah.
I'm sorry if you already answered this, you can just say, I already answered this, because I came in late. But in your residency here, was there anything new that you had, like something, corner you turned, or it doesn't have to be so dramatic, but is there something in working here at Home Resource that like inspired you in a new way, or you just had fun because you had all of this stuff to get to play with?
I mean, I definitely had fun to get to play with all that stuff. Honestly, I did talk about it, but it's okay.
I'm so sorry.
No, not at all. Where it wasn't necessarily here, but I got to spend a lot of time on the laser at the makerspace in the library.
Oh, sure.
And being able to play with that and add in that level of technology to this like traditional craft that I do was very inspirational.
Cool.
I have many plans for that.
Cool. I'll watch the video later.
Well, if not, thank you all for coming. Come up, ask questions, play with the stuff, please.